Welcome home. We are WNST. Towson, Baltimore. Baltimore Positive. We have a baseball and football weekend in August here where we're going to be paying close attention to all things. Luke Jones going to be in and around Camden Yards from one side to the other and out in Owings Mills prior to and then afterward as we, I don't know that I've ever figured out this three-game system as to what it means for cuts or players or timing and all that. That's why I have Luke. That's why Chat Steele allows Luke access and not me, because I don't really know the cadence of three preseason games. I just know they're going to stink. Luke has been out in Owings Mills all week long trying to get guys healthy, and I think unlike Grayson Rodriguez and unlike Jordan Westberg and guys that the Orioles are waiting on, the Ravens can wait forever on Tyler Linderbaum or Kyle Hamilton. They're not playing this weekend. So part of that is the backfields and I guess more than anything in Owings Mills, the trainer's room, to figure out how they're shaping up to become a complete football team before September 5th when they take on the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, it's no longer forever because they're 3 weeks out, but they still have some time. And the fortunate thing for the Baltimore Ravens with the injuries that they have had over the course of training camp, other than Arthur Millette missing some time into September, as John Harbaugh recently confirmed, and we know Malik Ham, the Baltimore kid, who may or may not have been part of the outside linebacker rotation. Injuries are dealing with right now are not the long-term jeopardizing the start of the season. In fact, we talked about Kyle Hamilton the other day, the injury scare he had. Kyle Hamilton was back at practice on Tuesday, full participant, made a spectacular pass breakup on a deep ball of Lamar trying to hit Zay Flowers. And he looked like Ed Reed on steroids making that play. The leg's okay. I could say that with great confidence in how he looked. But, you deal with nagging things. You mentioned Tyler Linderbaum. They're clearly being careful with him. But by and large, they're mostly healthy. The Wiggins thing, they dodged a bullet there. He's missing some time, but expected to be ready in plenty of time for week one. So this next preseason game against the Atlanta Falcons is one of these rare occasions. It hasn't happened that often where the Ravens play a game at the stadium and then they'll clear out and the Orioles host the Red Sox that evening. That's only happened a couple times in these preseason situations.
Well, they prefer to not have it happen, honestly, right?
Sure. Yeah, well, of course. And that's why the Ravens ended up playing their game at noon, and the Orioles and Red Sox, I think that was originally a 4:00 game and that got moved back to 7.
By the way, if I ever get a chance to talk to Mr. Rubenstein, I never will. I've met his people. They're lovely. They're just as lovely as you think they would be. I would ask him if he would be punitive toward the Ravens and allow them to move a football game so they could have a parade. I think it's a fair question to ask a baseball owner, because are they going to get along or are they not? Is Rubenstein and Bichette, are they going to play nice? Because that's a big part of the city. That's a big part of Baltimore Positive over the last 30 years was Angelos not just being an ogre to me, but to everybody. And his kid being really worse, his kid being worse really over the last 5 years as far as a human and a person and cooperation. There is a level of cooperation amongst these two teams on Saturday, as well as the police department, the city, and traffic and fans. Not for preseason on a Saturday morning, because we made fun of how few people showed up last week, but there is a point where, like, that's a good question for Mr. Rubenstein. If the Ravens win the World Series this year, are you going to kick them out the first Thursday of September next year to host the fair question for him, because this is the one day in 30 years that they've had the teams that they've actually played the same day. They've only done it 2 or 3 times ever, right?
Yeah, it's only been a couple other preseason games. I think it was the Hard Knocks year. The Ravens played like a Friday afternoon game against the Giants or something like that.
I remember that. I didn't go to that game. I was syndicated then. I remember that.
Right. I remember it because I remember Billick, because this was Hard Knocks and it was mic'd up, and he was talking to the team in the post-game locker room. He's like, hey, we got to clear out of here. Got to make room for the Orioles. And you could hear a couple players almost scoff at the time because the Orioles were awful at that point. But yeah, I mean, I haven't given it a whole lot of thought, but it's relevant. And I think what will help Saturday is if it's based off of, what we saw with even the Eagles, who certainly traveled, and some Philadelphia fans absolutely were in the stadium last Friday night. Don't think the Atlanta Falcons are going to be bringing many fans to town for a preseason game. So I know they're marketing it as Kids Day. They're doing some different stuff like that, face painting, different things like that. But, we know it's not going to be a full 70,000 seat kind of capacity
You're looking
crowd.
forward to the baseball more than the football this weekend, as we all are. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's curiosity with, as I always talk about with preseason football, especially now, you're looking at individuals, right? There's a lot made about the offensive line in the preseason opener. Game two, do we see more of Roger Rosengarten at right tackle and less of Patrick McCary? Do we continue to see Voorhees at left guard? Do we continue to see Falele at right guard? Yeah, so you're watching the individuals. I definitely want to see on the opposite side of the ball. I want to see David Ajabo. Hopefully, maybe he's cleared for this game. He's been practicing fully, so he's got to be close. They wouldn't be letting him practice if he wasn't close to being cleared for a game. So you're watching young guys, you're watching individual performances, but yeah, we know we're not going to see the starters. That's obvious. That's been evident for a couple years now from the moment the J.K. Dobbins injury occurred. I think that was the obvious sea change. But you still want to see crisp performances from those who frankly need them. So you want to see that. You want to get out of the game without any major injuries. Again, the last game they had some guys banged up, Wiggins being at the top of the list, but minor injury. So that's where you are right now. There isn't a whole lot of interest in that. To your point, yeah, there's way more. These games against the Red Sox this weekend mean way more to the Orioles than anything that's going to happen as far as anyone playing in Saturday's game for the Ravens. But you still want to see the young guys play well. You still want to see them compete. You want to see maybe some young guys that may have struggled in that first game take another step. We talked about this a couple days ago. Voorhees, for example, I've seen some mixed opinions about his play. So that's fine. It's his first competitive game since November of 2022, I guess it was, for Andrew Voorhees. So let's see him look better in the next game. I still think he's going to be the starting left guard, but you want to see growth. That's the biggest thing. If you ask John Harbaugh with full truth serum, what do you really want to get out of these preseason games, and specifically game 1 to game 2 now? He'd say, I want these young guys who've never played in the NFL, never played in an NFL stadium, were starstruck by the lights and all of that, especially these guys that played at smaller schools. I want to see them look more comfortable in game 2. I want to see them play like they belong. And I want to see growth. I want to see improvement. I want to see mistakes that occurred in week 1 not occurring again in week 2. I think that's something you'll hear coaches say a lot. One of the biggest compliments you'll see them pay a young player is they don't make the same mistake twice. When guys make a mistake, they want to see them correct it and then be better for it moving forward. So, it kind of sounds like coach speak, and I'm giving you a little bit of that because, hey, there's only so much I could say about these preseason games, but there is validity to that. There is something to the idea of, okay, mistakes that a Voorhees or someone like that makes in game 1, clean that up in game 2. Look better in game 2. Look more consistent. Look more comfortable. Don't look as nervous in game 2. And I'm just using Voorhees as an example.
Well, that's a respond to coaching issue in August for all of them to say, here's the tape. Here's what you did wrong. Can you make it right? That's football, right? And and some of these guys, Billick would always say this, some of these guys can't. Some of these guys just aren't good enough. And then some of these guys used to be. And you're trying to figure all that out. What was last year? What was last week? We're trying to figure that with the rotation of the baseball team right now. Pitching last month isn't this month. But in the case of some of these young players, they're just names on a draft sheet to most of us. And how that, I remember Kyle Hamilton. Why did we draft a safety? Then you go out there and you see him play. Same thing with Linderbaum. Why do we get rid of Hollywood Brown to get a center? And then 3 years later, you got an all-pro and you got somebody that you can really pair with your $50 million quarterback to create some things. Trying to rebuild this offensive line, it was never going to be rebuilt in the offseason. We knew that when they lost last year, dude. We knew when they lost. We were questioning, is Stanley back? What are they going to do about Zeitler? What are they going to do about Moses? Well, they made their decisions. They decided based on what they saw last year to get young. They really did.
Yeah, they did. And we're going to see how that works out. As I've also said to you, I've questioned whether getting rid of Zeitler and Morgan Moses was maybe a step too far. And we're going to see. We're going to find out. Again, it might be fine. And some of this is also going to be, how does Kevin Zeitler look in Detroit? How does Morgan Moses look with the Jets, right? So part of it is evaluating and saying, okay, Ozzie Newsome famously said it years and years ago, and Eric DeCosta subscribes to the same idea. It's an organizational philosophy. When you're talking about a veteran player, they've often said not always, but sometimes you get rid of a guy a year too early and you prefer that than it being a year too late. And we're going to see with Zeitler. We're going to see that with Morgan Moses. We're going to see that. And some of that's also going to be based on how, whether it's Falele at right guard or Rosengarten at right tackle or whoever ultimately is playing there, how do they fare? So I'll say this. It is way easier making those decisions that you just mentioned, Nestor, in March and April and May when you're not playing any games and you're just looking at it on paper or on a computer screen, or you're watching some film of how a player looks in college and you say, hey, that looks like that'll work at the next level. Now's the time where you see what that looks like and it comes to fruition. You hope. Other times, it's Alejandro Villanueva, who, was not a good replacement for Ronnie Stanley, or it's not having a replacement for Marshall Yanda back in 2020, which, hey, it's not easy replacing a Hall of Fame right guard, a guy who's going to be in the Hall of Fame at some point. So, these are tough decisions, and this is still part of the learning process for these younger guys, and frankly, for these coaches even figuring it out. I think they have an idea, a pretty good idea in their mind of what they think the offensive line is going to look like in week one. But hey, that doesn't rule out the possibility of adding a veteran player between now and then. We've seen that happen. I'll remind everyone, it was just around this time last year when the Ravens signed Jadeveon Clowney. They didn't sign Kyle Van Noy to the last week of September. So there's still that possibility. I'm not necessarily anticipating any additions of that magnitude, but we can't rule it out.
Well, that wouldn't shock me. They're going to add a player or two there's going to be a guy on the roster September 5th who's a veteran player who's going to be on their team, who's in another camp right now. There's no question about that.
Oh, I mean, I don't want to say no question because they don't do that every single year, but there's certainly a very legitimate chance that could happen. Now, is it a starter? That remains to be seen. It could just be an offensive lineman that is a backup that has a little more versatility, has another Patrick McCary kind of guy, right? Someone that you say, hey, if Falele falls on his face at right guard, we can pivot to this guy in week 3, and he'll probably give us a slightly higher floor.
By the way, that is a strength of their organization with Kokinis, who I don't see anymore or talk to. I mean, I've been out there 2.5 years since they threw me out. I don't see these guys to interact with them in the way that I did my job. But seeing people like Kokinis and knowing pro personnel around the league, they do this really well. They do it really well that they look at the Packers and say, there are 3 guys on the edge of their roster the Packers might cut. That guy might be able to help us. And they know all of that. They're not like the Orioles used to be, just slapping around trying to figure this out, getting thrown out of South Korea for scouting. They really do scour the league. And this is, to your point, why the Van Noys and why the Clowneys, why, I don't want to say plug and play veterans, but Zeitler, Morgan Moses, you name all these guys that they have brought from other places, that they're good at saying, yeah, Voorhees is okay and he's young and good, but this other left guard just got cut and we can rely on him more than a young guy, whatever it would be. Or we tried it for 8 months to get this young kid ready to play, and this veteran's available. I want to win a Super Bowl. I'd rather go get that guy. And especially along the offensive line, if this doesn't work out, there will be spare parts out there. There will be veteran players that get cut that they would say, all right, bring that guy in. The way the Orioles went after Sir Anthony Dominguez, and, bringing in veteran players at this time of the year it's not uncommon, and they're really good at it. I guess that's my point is, as a unit, because they've been working together so long, they can get in a room, and if George Kokinis jumps on the table and says, Browns cut this guy, and, look at the tape, John, look at the tape, Eric, you want this guy, Joe, and they know the league well. They know the league well because this is where continuity helps them a lot.
It definitely does. And look, they don't bat 1,000, but to your point, their batting average when it comes to those additions, much higher than most teams out there. There's no question about that. So,
and they're low risk acquisitions in a general sense anyway. If it's Andre Garrod and it doesn't work out, like to your point, Villanueva was a primary, planned addition that didn't work out. Same thing with Earl Thomas. I mean, there were a lot of money there. That does happen. I want to look, as much as I beat up their integrity and their character, and with good reason, I've been locked out. So I can say that out loud and with full conviction. that they're creepy. But all that being said, they're really good at picking football players, and they're really good at this specific aspect of picking up veteran football players. If they're picking somebody else up from another organization because they feel like they have a deficiency, I will endorse that.
Yeah, and I think with the O line specifically, it might not even be someone who's cut, but maybe there's a partner out there where there's a pick swap. Maybe you trade, I don't know, you trade a defensive back, someone that's further back on your depth chart, but someone that would be of use to another team. That team has a guard that is making a little more money than that team wants to pay because they just drafted a guy that they feel is comparable. And they say, hey, we'll swap fourth round picks. You give us an extra sixth and you can have this guy. I mean, there are deals like that potentially could be out there. Now, I'll remind everyone, offensive line plays at a premium in this league. And that's where it is unsettling when you're trying to replace three starters. And, that's where, for me, as I just recently did my latest 53-man roster projection, which you can check out at baltimorepositive.com right now, it's one thing talking about who their starting five is going to be. But where I have some trepidation is beyond that. And I'm not panicked over it, but I think it's naive to not have at least some concern, some angst to see what it's going to look like. Even with Lamar Jackson being the bonus that he is, that helps out an offensive line, even with Derrick Henry carrying the football, which should help. If the run blocking isn't perfect, he should still be able to make it work better because you're paying him a lot of money, as I pointed out, as far as that factor. But for me, it's not even just the starting five. I am concerned, though, about their depth because I look at, for me, I think they have 8 guys that are locks to be on the 53-man roster, barring a trade, barring anything unforeseen, injury, anything like that. But you have Linderbaum at center, of course. You have Stanley at left tackle. Voorhees presumably at left guard. A right guard continues to be Daniel Faalele. We'll see if that continues in that way. You have Rosengarten. And then, of course, from a depth standpoint, you have McCary, you have Ben Cleveland, and you have Josh Jones, the veteran they picked up, who's another backup type who, could start some games at some point, but looks like he's going to be a backup. That's 8. Typically, they like to have 9, maybe 10. I don't know who that 9th is right now. Maybe it's Nick Samac, the 7th-round center that they drafted, who got hurt last year, and that's why he was available in the 7th round. Is it Big Sala, who a year ago at this time we were talking about maybe being their starting left guard, and he's just fallen off the face of the earth in terms of the starting O-line. I mean, he played late in Friday's game. I'm not sure he's making the team. So it might just be, even if it's not a starter, Nestor, it might be go out and get another veteran depth piece for your offensive line. Someone that another team wants to save $2 million, and you sign that guy and you say, hey, if Voorhees falters or if Faalele falters or if someone gets hurt,
you need another McCary, is what you're saying.
Right. I would feel better about this offensive line through a 17-game schedule if, you kind of just took the words right out of my mouth. If you had another Patrick McCary guy, ideally Patrick McCary is not one of your starters, right? He's your 6th man. In basketball terms, he's your 6th man. He's your utility infielder. He's that guy that if he has to play because someone's going to get hurt, even if it's for a game or two, or even if it's just for a quarter or two, you can trust that Patrick McCary is going to go into the game and he's at least going to know his assignment and he's going to play with a high enough floor that you've got a chance. If he's going to have to play for 8 weeks, then generally he's going to get exposed a little bit more, but he's a very valuable player in that way. Do they have is there an interior lineman out there that could at the very least be that for them? Because it's great to look at it in the summertime and say, yeah, we think he can do that job. Yeah, we think Voorhees can be the left guard. Yeah, we think Faalele might be able to do this right guard thing. He's looked better than we thought he might. But sometimes you get to week 3 and you say, what? It's not happening. It's not looking good. He's not handling it. And sometimes you need to pivot. So that might be the more realistic option, Nestor, than just saying, hey, you need to go out and find someone who's going to start. Right? I think that would be very ambitious based on the fact that they don't have a lot of cap space and teams aren't eagerly trading offensive linemen in this day and age in the NFL. So maybe there's a depth piece out there because, again, it's one thing to talk about the 5 starters. I'm uneasy about their depth on the offensive line. I mean, how could how could you feel good about it, right? I mean, you're trying to figure out who your starters are, let alone who the backups are going to be. So I'm not saying that panicked in a big picture. Oh my gosh, it's going to impact their season in a harsh manner, but you do have to be mindful of your depth. And I get to 8, but typically you want to keep 9 or 10 offensive linemen, and I just don't know if they have that many guys on their roster that are truly worth keeping in that capacity. So is there a veteran backup type, someone that started games, someone that can give you a high floor? Basically what John Simpson did for them last year. You know, as much as we lump him in with Zeitler and Morgan Moses, John Simpson was a below average starter in terms of really looking at the quality of his play. But he started every game. He played more snaps than anyone on that O-line. What did he do? He offered a high floor. He was dependable in terms of what he actually gave you. So is there another veteran out there that could be that if need be? If you have an injury or two, or if one of these young guys can't do the job, and you're looking at it and it's October 5th and you're saying, oh, this is not trending well for this guy at this spot, then maybe we'll turn to this individual. So we'll see. And look, everything I just said, the same could apply to their pass rush, right? Same thing. They've got a bunch of young guys behind Van Noy and Owe who are major question marks right now. The team talks them up. They have their bright spots in practice, but what are they going to do on the field? So it's the same exact deal. Well, edge rushers and offensive line. You've got young guys that you're cautiously optimistic about. They're going to get opportunities, but if there's a veteran that comes free that can be had for a reasonable price, in terms of draft picks or trading from another position of depth, then I think you absolutely could see that happening because, to your point, Nestor, what you said a few minutes ago, they've been pretty good at identifying veterans coming in, whether it's free agents, whether it's someone that you acquire in a trade or someone that gets cut, guys that can come in and do a nice job for them in some capacity. So yeah, if you're asking me what their 53-man roster is come September 5th, I'd say there is a very reasonable chance, not a guarantee, but a reasonable chance that we see a veteran or two added along the way.
He is Luke Jones. He is a Baltimore Luke. He's going to be out in Owings Mills prior to and then after and right on up until we get on the plane for Kansas City in a couple of weeks. Get closer now, right? I mean, it's getting a little more real. And I guess cuts happen after third or after second. There'll be some cuts this week. This is the part I began the whole segment with. I don't really understand the cadence of three games. And we won't have to work too long on it because they'll be playing 18 soon. They'll be down to 2, right?
Well, they don't do the levels of cuts anymore. They just wait. They go from 90 to 53 basically now. But because part of the concern with that was you would cut guys and then you get to the last preseason game and you'd have a shorter roster and you didn't want to play your starters, and then you'd have a really short roster, really shallow roster for that last preseason game. So they don't do the tiers of cuts anymore. It's just they cut down to 53 at the end of the month, and away we go at that point. So they want all those guys to line up and play against the Falcons and against the Packers next week.
All right. Well, rest up, towel off, double duty this weekend, triple duty if you count Mako. I'm getting in Ocean City. Luke will be in Owings Mills, and he'll be at Camden Yards. Might as well just get a cot down there from Friday until Sunday. And Luke and I will reconvene at the end of the weekend and see where the Orioles are, see where the Ravens are, see where the injuries are, and then we go into a little bit of a quiet period, have a lot of baseball before Labor Day, and then once comes real hard, beginning September 5th. On September 4th, I will be at Coco's. I'm wearing my Coco shirt. We will have the scratch-offs from the Maryland Lottery, the Gold Rush Sevens doublers to give away. I'm assuming by September 4th, I'll have the Raven scratch-offs to give away as well. Our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions keeping our water crystal clear. Planet Fitness trying to get my fat butt shape this summer before the end of the summer. They can do the same for you. We always do that, New Year's and summer and all that. Never a bad time to get in shape. Planet Fitness is right around the corner from you, as well as our friends at the Jiffy Murphy Lube Multi-Care, oiling us up. Get me down to Ocean City this weekend. We're at Mako. We're going to have both of our sitting senators, Ben Cardin and Chris Van Hollen, on the air next week for you. Also, just a lot of visitors and guests from down at the beach. A lot of Baltimore people are going to be down there. Follow along on social media. You can follow Luke at Baltimore Luke. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.